direction seems to have stuck. So if we think about art and craft and why they might be divided, we might think about who makes these things. For example, Michelangelo, not to pick on Michelangelo, like he's a cool dude, but you know, him and all the turtles, like many people revered by the Western art historical canon, is a white European fellow, and craft artists are typically women and people of color. The history of art and craft is presented to us as dichotomous, as two separate histories, but I suggest taking a more holistic view. In academia, to complicate things further, art tends to be a white-dominated field. Art, and specifically crafts like ceramics, became academized in the US after World War II when returning soldiers took advantage of the GI Bill to further their education and to take advantage of the therapeutic qualities of art. And of course, while the GI Bill was offered to all veterans, because of systematic racism and disparities of wealth and education, in practice, Black veterans didn't have full access to those benefits. I suspect this is one of the many factors that has had some influence on academic craft fields skewing white and male, while actual craft practices don't. Through a holistic art history, we can trace the trajectory of human technology. Art objects of all media have been used as far back as 35,000 BCE to communicate information, for politics, for ceremony, to create contracts, to wield power, to map literal, figurative, and cosmological spaces, and to create belonging, just to name a few functions. The interconnectedness of art, culture, and technology definitely didn't end in the Renaissance. Power often influences what is recorded in the history books, and I hope that as more folks study craft and research previously marginalized histories, we will eventually have a more integrated, less dichotomous fabric of art history, and one that does not elevate art above craft and hold European white men as the end-all be-all of art history. One thing that has changed, most notably by the Industrial Revolution and most recently by the digital age, is the potency of the simple act of making. So this is where I'm going to introduce the type of work that I make, socially engaged craft. If we reference our handy dandy Western canon, we see socially engaged art crop up in the 90s in the form of relational aesthetics. So this book on the left is by Nicole and I read it in grad school, and it's really complicated, but basically the gist is relational aesthetics is like some aesthetic thing that is happening and creating a sort of relation, some kind of experience or interaction, and that experience is the artwork. And relational aesthetics doesn't even need an object. To put that more academically, relational aesthetics is, according to Borio, a set of artistic practices which take as their theoretical and practical point of departure the whole of human relations and their social context. In the picture here on the right, Rikrit Teravanija is serving curry in a gallery, and that dinner party is the art, which is pretty cool. But the artist's point of departure is the whole of human relations and their social context. To me, it kind of sounds like we've been talking about this whole time. It's almost like the capital A art world didn't discover socially engaged art. It's been part of the fabric of art practices all along. So this is a piece by one of my socially engaged mentors, and he created cups to fill all these little houses, and then people could bring their own misfit cup in and trade for a handmade cup. And the idea was that it's like some cup that just keeps getting pushed to the back of the cabinet and not getting used. So for me, the goal in socially engaged craft is not to just make an object that stands alone, as it might be in traditional ceramics, but to make an object or project that brings about an occurrence, an experience, or connection. Alone, the project is not complete. That experience must occur to complete the work, and it might not. There's a certain amount of improvisation and risk inherent in our practice, but like any discipline, we can prepare and practice and make our desired outcome more likely. Because we're often reliant on participation, it's impossible to control fully for all variables. And in fact, we wouldn't want to. That might be sort of manipulative. Okay, so I just thought it'd be fun to scroll through a little bit of older work and then talk about a little more about some projects that are more recent. So this is work from around 2002, my undergrad thesis. This is a little bit after that. As a post-baccalaureate, this is a collaborative project. My friend and I made an entire gas station out of cardboard. We also made a gas pump and a Hummer, which are not pictured. And I took a bit of time off of school and then went back in my 30s. And this is some work I made that first year back. I was really interested in wonder and beauty. This is at a residency. This is that show in Shigaraki. And some more work in grad school. And then this piece.
Oh, can you slow down a little? I want to take a better look at what you're doing.
Sure. You mean go back a little?
I'd like to just spend just a little time with.
Sure.
Thank you.
I'm going to talk a little bit more about some other projects. I just thought it'd be fun to show these. Okay. So during the summer before my last year of grad school, I decided to just do this like fun project I'd been thinking of for a long time. I created beer cups with typically male and typically female reproductive systems on them, and the name, diagnostic tool and cure for 4 curable sexually transmitted infections: chlamydia, gonorrhea, syphilis, and crabs. Because curable STIs are, funny, incurable ones maybe wouldn't be so funny. So the idea was that they were going to be used in a bar to literally put the topic of sex, safe sex, and consent on the table. And I was able to get a bar to work with me. And I've actually been able to serve beer in these at bars in 2 different towns. And it was really cool. Basically, there was a lot of peer-to-peer education happening, lots of really interesting conversations. And like I said, I just did it for funsies, but it was this really exciting moment. Just a few more images from the bar. Okay, people really seem to like them, but not everyone. I'm not sure how well you can see this, but some of the STD cups were in a show, and I just happened to see this on Facebook. Someone posted about them and how they said, I'm not so sure about them, which I just thought was really funny. Okay, so this was one of the aha moments in my work where I felt like all these parts of myself that I struggled to put together finally worked. So reproductive health and education, craft and aesthetics, and people interacting and learning from each other. This is definitely not always the case, but this is kind of what I'm striving for, and it's nice when it happens. Since that project, most of my work can be summed up with the term "the personal is political." This term is often attributed to second wave feminists, but like many things attributed to white women, it was most likely first said by Claudia Jones, a Black feminist Marxist, and this was a bit before the second wave feminism happened. The personal is political refers to recognition that misfortune, lack of agency, oppression is not just the result of personal circumstances or shortcomings, but of systematic oppression of one group of people for the benefit of another. I started to make work in my last year of grad school about abortion because as a clinic assistant at various Planned Parenthoods and independent abortion clinics, I had heard hundreds of people's stories on the occasion of their abortion. I saw firsthand how inaccurate and damaging the anti-choice rhetoric about abortion procedures and the people that get abortions could be. I also saw how that false rhetoric affected patients. At times, even the feminist narrative can be problematic because it is so caught up in countering the anti-choicers. Imagine, and many of you don't have to imagine because abortion is such a common and regular part of reproduction, that in addition to what may or may not be a difficult choice, in addition to figuring out if you can afford an abortion because your healthcare is banned from covering it if you're lucky enough to have healthcare, figuring out if you can afford a baby, taking your partner, family, kids into consideration. On top of all that, you also have to think about the ever-present judgment of Mike Pence, a bunch of white men in Washington, D.C., your nosy neighbor, and melodramatic TV show characters. And of course, we do. The stigma of abortion and basically everything having to do with reproduction, menstruation, and miscarriage, etc., is huge. So this decision that people are making but having to navigate shame, judgment, and economic barriers. And of course, this isn't personal. This is strategic and political. Despite coming squarely from the abortion access side of things, in graduate school, when I first began my research, I discovered the organization's sister song, Women of Color Reproductive Justice Collective, and the term reproductive justice. In 1994, they coined this term, and I've included their definition on the slide, but to sum it up, it takes a human rights framework approach to reproductive health advocacy that included the experience of poor women, women of color, trans folks, and other marginalized folks. As they say in their definition, abortion access is critical, and women of color and other marginalized women also have difficulty accessing contraception, comprehensive sex education, STI prevention and care, alternative birth methods, adequate prenatal and pregnancy care, domestic violence assistance, and adequate wages to support our families, safe homes, and so much more. This holistic approach really aligned with my radical feminist values, and more importantly, it was a nudge to check the privilege that I experienced as a white woman and look to women of color for leadership in this movement. Going to quickly but slowly go through this project, my graduate thesis work called Awe Agency. This was the first iteration using the speakers with interviews with folks who self-identified their abortion experience as positive. The idea was to offer an alternative paradigm for folks. All abortion stories are important and valid, but I was interested in seeing what happened when you present a reality where feeling like it is a positive thing is okay. The video in the background shows someone writing out words from the interviews. Okay, so another project that I'm going to talk a little bit about in a little more detail is the 10,690 wildflowers. In this project, I wanted to combine several different motivations. Again, I had this kind of idea of what I wanted to do before I knew what I would make. I wanted to connect, so this was a project that was going to take place during NCECA 2017 in Portland, Oregon. This is a yearly ceramic educators conference. And it is a pretty big draw, like around 6,000 people come to the city, whichever city it's happening in. So for this project, I wanted to help visitors connect to the city. I wanted there to be an interactive clay component. I wanted to connect the gallery and conference audience with the reproductive justice community. And I wanted to funnel some of that positive economic impact that happens during large conferences directly to the reproductive justice movement. In fact, that little diagram is what I started out before I knew what I would make. I finally settled on creating, I settled on creating coil-built vases that would house porcelain flowers that were created during discussion workshops, which took place on the Capitol steps. That's what's happening in this picture. These pictures are from Olympia. In the bar, the East Side Tavern actually, and in the gallery. The flowers were offered for donation, 100% of which was donated to the Northwest Abortion Action Network. And they're an abortion fund that serves Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and Alaska. And a percentage of the vases was also donated. I invited clinics in Portland and organizations to host satellite flower arrangements. Donations for flowers were also accepted there. And it was an added bonus to have affordable art in the clinics. So this is 2 Planned Parenthoods and an independent abortion clinic in Portland. I also there were several iterations of this project. This was an image from a Tallahassee, which is the capital of my home state in Florida. And with the money raised from this, I donated to a local Southeastern abortion fund. I worked with the FSU Art Department faculty, Holly Hennessian, and her students, and partnered with local agencies to do flower making events in the museum. I was able to go be a visiting artist, and then the students and agency representatives hosted the flower making events in my absence. All right, so we're getting to some more recent work and also the end of the talk. This platter series plays with the idea of historic sprigging decoration as analogous to contemporary zine making. Zines, short for magazine, are informal cut and pasted booklet-like vehicles with roots in science fiction fandom, punk, and the Riot Grrrl movement. They're used for conveying information in a quick and democratic way. I wanted to, basically, out of frustration, I wanted to just kind of give some positive affirmations. So this series is called Things That Shouldn't Need to Be Said. And of course, there's the invisible, but obviously have to at the end of that. My goal with all of my work is to be firm and unapologetic, but gentle. In the documentary, The Punk Singer, which is about the band Bikini Kill, which, yes, is cited in my thesis exhibition paper, Kathleen Hanna talks about how Bikini Kill often yelled at the oppressor. The songs were like angrily yelling at the oppressor, but in the band La Tigra, they were singing to their friends. So I'm always trying to make work for my friends and sort of bypassing the bullshit, if you will. It is sometimes hard though. To make this a little bit more interactive, to really include the viewer, I offered porcelain buttons, and gallery patrons could create their own take on things that should not need to be said, but clearly do. And I think some of you have buttons from that, so hopefully you enjoyed it. And then the last piece I'm going to talk about was also in that same exhibition at SPSCC. Is a collaboration between a friend and fellow artist, Mac Starr McCusker. Mac is an artist that lives and works in North Carolina and is part of the socially engaged craft collective Artists Collective with me. And we wanted to explore the idea of privilege, since we both, as a white woman and a white trans man, have targeted identities, but due to our white skin, we have an incredible amount of privilege too. And so we wanted to explore that and give folks a way to explore that information. So in this art game, two people play against each other. Each game piece signifies a common privilege, and players should select each one that applies to them. And once they've placed them on the scale, you count them, and the player with the most privileges wins. We think it's an interesting way to just think about which privileges apply to you and how to, and sort of to take some awareness about them from the game. Okay, so that's it. Thank you so much. I'm going to stop sharing. Oh, good. Now I can see everyone. And I'm going to transition. Oh, good. We're running right on time into a demo for some of the ways that I make the platters, some basic hand building techniques. And I was thinking, since this is not a throwing demo, it's not mesmerizing, if anyone has questions or comments, we can kind of do both. So as I set up for the demo, any questions for me?
I have a comment.
Sure.
I kind of appreciate the part that where you said that you're speaking to your friends And it's very important when you're making a statement to actually figure out who you're talking to. And I struggled with that for a long time. And I came to the same conclusion. I appreciate the fact that it's better to, sometimes, not always, but sometimes it's better to arm people with support than it is to attack someone's ingrained traditional beliefs. So I kind of really enjoyed that part of your talk and other things as well, but I'll let you get on with it now.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I'm like totally angry. I have a lot of rage, but I just feel like it's not that useful. For me, it's like a good way for me to just curl up in a fetal position on the floor and do nothing. So, all right, so I'm gonna grab some clay. I have a lot of cords. So I'm usually kind of like a rule breaker, I guess, and I'll really wedge my clay. Let's see if we can get this. When I'm hand building too much, but oh, this is like the smallest platter. I'm going to show you a few of the techniques I use to make this. So this is a very simple plate making technique that I'm going to show you, and then these decorative pieces are made with what are called sprig molds. And again, they're also very simple but very useful, so I'll show you how those work. And so you can see this part is a pretty kind of organic shape. So because I want that organic shape, I'm going to go ahead and start by wedging a ball of clay. How's everyone doing this afternoon?
Enjoying a clay demonstration, Nicole. What kind of clay are you using?
Oh yeah, so I'm using porcelain.
That's what I thought.
And well, we mix clay in a factory now with a bunch of different ingredients, and this is formulated to maturity 6, which is cooler than proper porcelain found in the ground would fire to. But porcelain is basically made from a clay material that was found at the place where it became that mineral. Basically, some stuff decayed out of it, and it didn't move. So when we think of like finding clay by a riverbed, that clay has moved, and because it's been in water, it's gotten finer particles and it's picked up lots of other elements and minerals like iron. And this hasn't, so that's why it's really white, not because it's special. In fact, because it hasn't moved around, the particles are a little bigger and it's a little bit more pesky of a material. Although, I mean, once you get used to any material, it's fine. But it is a little more prone to cracking because of that. But yeah, it's has other qualities that I happen to like. So yeah, that's what I'm using. Let's go back down here. So watch your volume because I'm about to do something that's a little loud. So my light doesn't fall. This is maybe a big rolling pin for the job, but I like to use my rolling pin and I like to pound out my slabs. And so it would be noisier with a bigger chunk of clay. And the reason I do that is because that downward action is helping align all those clay minerals so that they are a little bit stronger. I'm going to be a little bit noisy again. I usually have a ring light on my table. Okay, and so now I'm going to do something that's called like throwing a slab. And then I'm going to compress all those particles down again. So you could cut this into like a particular shape if you wanted to. Even like a, you know, a elaborate scalloped edge. But for these pieces, I've enjoyed just leaving those edges like the way they end up. But I am going to just compress the top and bottom of the slab using my trusty red rib. And it's very satisfying. I wish I could like zoom in. Basically, I'm just compressing that top, getting those particles all nice and aligned. Do the same thing on the bottom.
Are you basically smoothing it out, or are you adding water? You didn't put water down, did you?
I did. I just dipped this in water. You don't have to, but because I don't know if it's because of the larger particle size, but I find with just a dip of water on the rib, it helps smooth it a little bit more. I think with a regular stoneware, you don't even need to do that. Mm-hmm. All right, so I am going to set this one aside, but through the wonders of technology, I've got one prepared. So I'm going to set this aside and let it set up. This is like when Julia Child opens the oven in the back and it's already done. So here is a piece that has set up. So it's just a little bit stiffer. And then this is kind of magical. I have, let's get this set up. You could use like an old couch cushion. I just have 3 pieces of like egg crate foam. I'm going to put this directly on the foam. And then you can use, I'm going to get an object that sort of fits inside of here. That's going to make that interior part of the plate. You can literally use anything. Something that's really nice if you're doing a bunch that are the same size is you can get or cut pieces of wood. But I am scrappy and I always just use things that I find around my studio. So I'm going to use this container here, but what we're searching for is something that is flat. If I was using wood, I would just use it directly on the clay, but since I'm using plastic, which is sticky, I'm going to protect the clay with a sheet of plastic. I know the computer mic, I'm wondering if it's picking up the hand noise more than my voice or if it's pretty okay.
It's fine.
Okay, perfect, just checking. Okay, so I'm just gonna go, I'm gonna just show you all this again. I'm just gonna go where I think this is gonna make a nice platter shape. And just a reminder, of course, you could cut this into some more elaborate shape if you want. But again, I just like that. Because I'm just going to collage and layer, I like that unexpected edge. So I'm just putting this kind of in the middle, and then you can see this all really well. Just gonna go, and here we go.
Cool.
So I set that one aside, and I'm also going to show you to make a little bit more of a traditional plate. Again, I'm just using things I'm finding in my studio. There's always good circular things in ceramic studios. So I'm actually going to cut this one. This is another slab that I had setting up. You could just do this in your studio, let it set up for like 20 minutes, obviously depending on the humidity. These I let set up for like 20 or 30 minutes yesterday, and then I put them on top of plastic and under plastic so they wouldn't get too dry. Okay, so I cut that, and I'm going to do exactly the same thing. This time I'm going to be a little more careful since I have a proper circle. one more time. I've been making these for things to go under my plants. Very simple plate making. These are great for if you're gonna do like kind of collage layering, cutting, pasting like I'm doing. Or they're also great if you're more of a two-dimensional artist. You can draw and paint on them. So I don't know, maybe Lynette, I'll have to bring one to your house with some underglaze and we could collab. Or there's so many people in this room, but Lynette's just like 2 blocks away. So now I'm just gonna show you really quick the wonders of sprig molds. Any other questions or anything?
Nicole, is there a certain, maybe geography, maybe is the word, where porcelain is found? Is it a...
Yeah, kind of. So we do have some porcellaneous, can I say mines in the US, but it really wasn't found in the US. So if you, I'm not a clay historian, although I would really like to be, that's my next goal. But if you look at American pottery, we mostly have like American, North American, Mesoamerican. We mostly have low fire, so terracotta, things that are fired and they're still porous. And in Asia, especially Japan, China, and Korea, this is a weird way to talk, the natural like sort of sources were porcelain. And so they had no choice but to create high fire technology. So they created large wood kilns that got very hot so that porcelain would become almost like glass. This mid-range that a lot of people fire to, like at Arbutus, we fire to mid-range, and at SPSCC we do too. A lot of people do. It's sort of a new thing. Maybe some people track it to like the 70s when people got interested in saving energy, but we've had to kind of reformulate clays and glazes to work at this like mid-range temperature, we call it.
Huh.
But the big difference is basically like high fire gets things vitrified, so they're no longer porous. And one is not better than the other, they're just different physical qualities.
Cool.
Okay, so I'm going to show y'all some sprig molds really quick. So,
Nicole, sorry, I was gonna ask about that on that subject. If you fire porcelain, does it not need glazes as much? Is it more sort of a natural finish than the more porous low-fired clays that are less glassy naturally?
I guess so. That's like a very sciencey question. But
Okay, well, you don't have to answer that.
proper porcelain and stoneware, when they're fired to temperature, including the cone, a lot of the cone 6 ones, it really depends. But when they're fired, sort of, I guess we'll talk about like high fire, sort of naturally occurring clays and glazes, and then the technology that was created to meet that. They are not porous, so they absorb very little water, but they aren't necessarily a delightful surface.
Yeah.
So for sculpture, I love leaving porcelain raw, but for ware that I would eat off of or touch, I might glaze it. Of course, like you could, a lot of artists like Mariella, who's on here, you know, leave parts unglazed to take advantage of that difference in texture. So, but like functionally, I mean, it wouldn't absorb, like if you were drinking coffee, it wouldn't really be absorbed. That said, the surface is a little more rough. So on the inside, it might like harbor bacteria,
Yeah.
but probably not, you know?
Thanks.
That's like one of the things people talk about, but it's probably fine. Yeah. So again, you know, you could, and you can definitely take advantage of the difference in textures. But like if you had a terracotta cup and you put coffee in it, it would just seep out the bottom.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, I'm gonna show y'all a little bit of sprig mold action. So those pieces, The molds look like this, and they are just bisque fired clay. So that first firing before it's vitrified, where it is still porous. And these all came from, if you've ever come to a play with clay, you've met these before. They all came from, I knew I'd forget to get one thing ready. This thrift store find. Just by pushing clay onto different parts of it, I used cornstarch so it wouldn't stick because this is plastic. And then firing them, I get these cool molds. This is, I don't have it anymore. I gave it to someone on the Buy Nothing group, but this is a like silver tray. So you could get these off of literally anything. You could even, like there's some exposed brick right here, and I could press clay up against it and then have the texture of exposed brick. So just gonna take a scrunch of clay. I'm gonna take a scrunch of clay, and depending on which one I want to use, I will make a little sort of blank. So let's say I'm going to use this one. I'm going to just make a little thing like this. Now this is very porous, so if I stick this on, it doesn't stick, which is great. But you just have to use a little fancy footwork. It's not fancy at all. So I'm going to use my thumb and I'm going to push this down and cover the whole area where there's texture. And then I'm going to keep that thumb in place and move to the next one. And I'm just going to keep going like that, making sure not to tip it, right? Because it will fall out. Same thing over here. And then got my mold. Another one. So put this in here, just going to push it and make sure I'm holding with one finger. Same thing. Oh, hopefully I wasn't doing that out of the screenshot. There are some that are a little more complex, which is fine. Just make sure I push all this in. And then same thing over here. When I'm doing a bunch at once, I kind of get pretty good at how much clay each one needs. But let's say I had a little like place that didn't get filled in, I could just pull some off and then push it in. So again, got this cool texture. And got lots right here, ready to go. My Betty Crocker oven. Have this larger platter that I made yesterday. Still a little softer than I would like, but that's fine. I think it'll be fine to show you all. Put this finished one away. So sometimes I like to use them when they're more on the wet side and just form them to the shape I want. You can see this one, this is the one I just made. This one's a little harder, so I can't really like bend it as well. So I'll kind of decide where I want it. Since this one is soft, I'm going to let this set up before I attach it. But then I'm going to show you one more thing. So this one, you can see there's all this extra clay on here. Sometimes, especially when I'm making a lot at once, I kind of like that extra clay and the texture it gets. But I can also take a Let's see if you guys can see this. I need one of those overhead cameras, right? Basically, I'm gonna just take my knife and go around the design, get rid of that extra clay. And then just to get rid of that harsh edge, which I mean, you, depending on your design, you could potentially use like that harsh cut edge compared to that texture. But for these, I have not been really taking advantage of that. Again, there's no like right or wrong. It's just kind of what you're trying to accomplish. I'm just doing a little soft pinch on the edge. So this is the one that I made yesterday, so it's set up a little. And you can see the difference between that edge and that sharp edge, that slabby edge, which again could be its own like aesthetic. And just doing a little bit of pinch. All right, and just gonna start scratching and scoring some of these babies on, but those are the two sort of techniques I wanted to demo. Any questions about them? Okay, cool.
How do you attach those then to the platter?
Oh yeah, I'm about to do that. So, here we go. Set out my tools, but the blonde ceramics, at least in my ceramic studio, that whatever tool you need is gone forever. So I'm gonna scratch and score, which is basically where we take two pieces that are, well, it depends on various things, but usually that are leather hard. These are on the soft side of leather hard, but leather hard means that they aren't like taking fingerprints, or they are not really bendable. If I bent this, it would break. I can show you with the scrap. If I bend it, it breaks. Always with clay, we don't want to do too much of this because it's going to weaken it. But when our clay is getting to that leather hard stage, it's going to break. If this was proper leather hard, it would just snap like chocolate. Maybe not quite as hard as chocolate. Maybe like cheddar cheese. So these are both in the leather hard realm. Leather hard is a really cool term because there's so many versions of it. There's like soft leather hard, hard leather hard, hard leather hard. Like there's no limit to that. So I'm taking, I have this cool tool, but you can also just use a needle tool or a fork or a knife. And I'm just creating some cross hatching here. This is the most important thing in all ceramics, like, well, in hand building, if you don't scratch and score, it will not connect. Clay remembers. You have to Velcro it, make some clay Velcro. All right, so done a good job of really scratching and scoring and cross hatching and roughing up that part of the surface. I use my needle tool to tell me where this is going to go on the other one. And I'm going to do the same thing here. Yeah, and I love this tool. For the longest time, I just had a fork in my toolkit. And then I like to use water. Some people like to use a clay slurry, which is called slip. I find with porcelain, water usually works pretty well, but everyone's different. There's just different ways people do things. So I'm putting just a little bit of water on both sides, and then I'm going to gently connect them. If you really listen, you can kind of hear the water squishing out. You can kind of hear it Velcroing. And because this is leather hard, I'm not smashing the pattern, it's keeping the pattern. A good way to know if something's stuck is if you try to pick it up. Obviously it's wet, so if you really pulled it off, it would come off. But basically if you can't do this without it coming off, it's not going to stay on in the kiln. So you just want to make sure you've got that nice firm connection. All right. So yeah, looks like we're getting there. Anything anyone wants to chat about?
I have a question.
Sure.
In terms of your interest in a socially engaged practice, do you think that art or craft has a special power or ability to communicate or teach or affect people, as opposed to more language-based ways that people might address the same concerns? And if you do, what do you think those special powers are?
That's a great question, and it's a huge question. So I can, one thing does come to mind, although I feel like there's just so many layers to that. I guess I don't necessarily think it's a better way to communicate. Like, I love the written word, and TV's pretty great. But I think that something that's nice about making work, and especially like making it together, it does a couple of things. So like with the flower making thing, actually the actual finished product was not my favorite project I've ever made. But what was really cool is when we were in a space making flowers with a like mandate that we'd be talking about. In the case of Portland, we were talking about the upcoming legislation around reproductive health care parity. We could be doing something while we talked, and it opened up people for conversation. Not necessarily everyone, obviously we're all different, but it was a nice way to communicate with people about something that maybe could be tense. And so that really varied. Like in the gallery, in the museum, it might not have just been people who agree with me necessarily. So I think that doing something creative together sort of lets us maybe talk more candidly. And I also think that when we're in a setting where, whether it's a gallery or just somewhere we know and art is happening, it is like a somewhat sort of safe place, right? Like, if you're in the gallery, there's certain laws dictating like what can happen. But it's also a place where you can feel safe, like opening up your brain and considering something different. So those are two ways that I try to like use the power of craft, I guess, in my work. Yeah, I think it's really it's really layered, and I think there's a lot of different ways to do it. Yeah, hopefully that answered your question.
Thank you.
Nicole, there are a couple questions in the chat.
Sure.
If you want to take a look, or I can read those to you.
No, I'm looking. Okay. Hey, that was my button. Yes, it was. Thank you for letting me take a picture. What brought you to Olympia from Florida? Well, I got a job at South Puget Sound Community College as the art studio technician. And I was at a point in my art life where I think in art, I feel like my life is always this sort of struggle between wanting more freedom and wanting more stability, especially because we live in the US, and so things like health insurance are tied to jobs. And I was at a point where I wanted more stability than freedom. It's like a constant struggle, and thankfully SPSCC is a really kick-ass place to work. Any future projects in the works? Oh yeah, I should read that Edmund DeWall book. What is in the works? I actually had a bunch of future projects in the works, but they've all been canceled due to COVID. So I was actually going to be going to a conference in March where Loretta Ross, one of the founders of Sister Song, was the keynote speaker. So I was pretty, and my speakers were going to be there. So I was pretty excited to potentially be in the same room with her and my speakers, and a show that I curated of other artists called Reproductive Justices for Everyone, but that got canceled. And I was also supposed to do a residency for a month this summer at the Alchemy Art Center on San Juan Island. And I guess maybe it's not officially canceled yet, but it seems pretty likely.
That's so sad.
Yeah. And I had a few local shows coming up with some of the folks that are here. So I guess we'll see what happens. Yeah. Let's see. How did I find Japan? Culture and communication issues in context of the message of your work. That's a good question. I mean, it was a cool place to live and work, and obviously, like, Japan is full of like other humans, and so it was great. I created a posse of friends, and I got to learn a little bit. I mean, obviously, like, as much as anywhere is the same, places are different, I was somewhere that had that porcelain history. So yeah, I got to learn a lot. In terms of, I don't know if by communication issues you mean like having a more like a assertive message in my work.
And also in context of, I know Japanese culture is a lot like British culture, and there's a lot people don't say, but they kind of expect you to get it. So I was wondering now, because you're very forward with your message, as I am too, and some cultures are more understanding of that than others. I know that for a fact, but yeah, so. Yeah.
At the time, so when I was in Japan, it was about a decade ago. So it was a bit younger, it was a decade ago in my life. And I wasn't I guess I wasn't necessarily as forward, but I mean, I was still like kind of, still had kind of a political, like, I mean, like I was still calling people on their homophobia or something. And, people took it in stride. I think, I actually went back somewhat recently, and not recently at all, but more recently than when I was living there. And I ran into someone, and they were like, they like told me a story about calling out somebody for using the term gay negatively. And I was like, oh, cool. That's cool. Glad I could help. Like, so, I mean, yeah, I think I was the same person and people took it in stride. But as far as my artwork, I really wasn't necessarily making work with a message then. That was that kind of aha moment around in grad school, which I guess was 2012 or something. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. I do feel like it helped influence my aesthetic to some extent, for sure. That and having Italian pastry bakers for parents, it's all in there somewhere.
I really love your aesthetic. And you can see the Japanese influence, but you have mixed in there a delightful kind of, I don't know, there's a kind of frilly girliness to it, which is, I also thought it's a challenging one. Your pieces are kind of rough cut and they're kind of stuck on, and they're kind of challenging you. So yes, I may be frilly, and I may be in a frock, or I may be in my parlor, but I'm still have an opinion, and I'm still a human being, and I'm still watching you. And I think that I find that strength in your work really, truly very delightful.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I answered all the questions. Well, it's really fun. Hopefully you could all see well. This is, like I said, this is my first time doing like a demo over the internet like this. So yeah. So much.
The demo was excellent, really well planned. And I can see how you like cooking as well now, watching your clay process.
Oh yeah, yeah. Yes, I joke that my dad would always come home from work every day with like flour on the top of his boots, and like my boots have clay dust on them. So.
Okay, I'm going to jump in. I wasn't sure when the right time to jump in was, but this is so fascinating and I loved it so much, Nicole. And I wanted to respond to the question about whether or not your clay medium, causes a different emotional response than talking, or that we were talking about that a few minutes ago. And I just wanted to share with this group that I have learned from Nicole about the power of clay to reach people's emotions more than words, or differently than words can sometimes. And I remember after the Pulse nightclub shooting in Florida that you asked if we could open up the clay studio to the public and just let people come in and just be together and make whatever comes to them. And it was the first time it really, well, it was one of the first times. I mean, all of those experiences were from you, but you've done that several times where there's something traumatic happening in the community and you wanted to allow people to come in and process their emotions with the clay. And it's just really opened my mind to the power of art, and I've seen it happen. I've seen you take clay to like the Gay Pride Festival, I think it was, to the Sylvester Park, and just let people play with clay. And you've taken clay to Rosie's place, and you've worked with youth, and there's no necessary message. I mean, well, there was one time where you were making vessels with homeless kids, youth, so that they could have something that holds things together. And I mean, the power is enormous. The power of that kind of activity is enormous. And I'm so proud that you have brought that to Arbutus, because it's just been something I'm happy that we have this venue that can do that. And I'll always be here for your ideas because I think they're brilliant and important. So thank you. Thank you all for coming today. And Pamela, do you want to say anything about when the next one was? I'm putting you on the spot. I know we have Kelly Rigg, our blacksmith, doing a demo. And if Kelly's a wonderful guy, a fabulous artist, and it's very interesting. So I hope you guys will attend that, and hopefully Pamela will have the details.
Yeah, it's this coming Wednesday, May 13th. I put it in the chat. I can't remember the time. I'm going to look it up really quickly. I think it's 1 o'clock, but I'm not sure. I just need to jump on our calendar really quickly.
I just wanted to say I'm reading the comments. Thank you, Ted. Thanks, Gabby and Alec. Yeah, and Clarissa, thank you too.
Yeah.
If you live in Olympia, once we're back up and running at Arbutus, definitely come do a play with clay if you want to get your hands in some clay. We'll see when we can do those again.
I'm still looking forward to doing a show sometime.
Yeah, thanks.
At the gallery, so I'm looking forward to that.
Yes, if you don't know Lynette's gallery, All Sorts, check it out. Yeah, I was really excited to get to show there in the fall. But yeah, we'll see what.
We may have to bump a few. I don't want to just bump 1 or 2 people, so we may have to move everyone on. But sometime, definitely, if not the end of this year, then next year, that would be great.
Well, thank you all so much.
Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you.
Oh, great.
All right. Bye.
Thanks, Pamela.
Thank you, Nicole. That was great.
That was good. Yeah. All right. I'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah, that will be fun.
I'm like, it'll be fun or scary. So many people.
Yeah, I mean, if you're okay with it, yeah.
Yeah, I'm into trying it. I was talking to Stacey about this. I just Like anxiety is kind of irrational. So like by keeping the distance, like I mean, I'm not keeping complete distance. Like I'm taking walks with Mariella and
Mm-hmm.
you in theory, but
Yeah.
it's like for my own mental health, you know, I need connection and friends.
Right. I know. Do you still have a roommate?
I do, yes, yeah, I do,
And so she's there.
yes. So
Okay.
that's one person that I don't have like distance with. I mean,
Yeah.
not like
Yeah.
that close to each other, but like our house is only so big, you know,
Yeah.
like touching all of the same things.
Well,
So
yeah.
yeah, but just like keeping the distance just like keeps my irrational anxiety at bay. I don't have to think like what if you got sick and then I was like, was that my fault? You know, it's irrational, but like the control, variable control.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just I look at the numbers every day, right?
Yeah.
And as a state, we're not doing that badly, although I have noticed that our numbers have been increasing recently, which is not cool. But also there's only been, what, 110 cases in all of Thurston County, which is a pretty big county.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
obviously not everyone's been tested and a lot of people are asymptomatic. So who knows what that means.
Right.
But
I mean, I think it makes total sense for you to be
yeah.
rail as
And
well.
I'm
And
not,
I don't think it doesn't make sense for me to be, but I just like I have my own irrational.
oh, totally. No, I am like, I get so like anxious whenever I have to go to the store or the post office. Oh my God, I hate the post office. No one knows how to be. When you
Yeah.
go to the post office, they're all, it's like they can't think. It's so fucking weird. And it's like, oh my God, get away from me. Why are you in my space?
It's like high anxiety.
Yeah. So, I mean, I get it. And but I'm just like, I'm working remotely for both jobs. When I do have to go to campus, I go into the studio where no one's working. And I'm not even running into people on campus. And I'm like sanitizing and washing my hands. And we have this antiviral spray and I spray everything with it. So it's like,
Oh, that's cool.
yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and then like with the sanitizer thing, it's like I'm doing it, but I'm also like, it's antibacterial, it's not antiviral. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's so hard.
I know.
I think we just have to do like, yeah, Stacey and I were talking about this, just everyone has like a different comfort level and I think we just have to, like do the best we can.
Yeah.
I don't think I would be doing very well if I hadn't been like going on walks with Mariella and Dory.
Yeah.
You know, it would just be really depressed. As it is, I'm already fighting off. And you know, as lots of people are.
Yeah, it's hard. And yeah, you know, I felt really bad about canceling on you last weekend, but I was like, I just can't. Like,
Yeah.
you know,
It was
and
fine. I had
it's
just
hard
gotten
to
the news about
forget.
Junior, so I wasn't in very good shape.
What's that?
Oh, sorry. I said it was totally fine. I had just gotten that news about Junior Thursday night.
Oh,
So I like it's kind of like when you texted, I was just like, yeah, perfect.
okay. Okay. Yeah, I just, you know, I was thinking about it and it was, you know, just knowing that we had the extension, I think like I had to mourn that again, you know, I had to re-mourn all this stuff that we're losing. And it was also like, I think this Tuesday was supposed to be the day I was to leave to go to Joshua Tree with Mariella and Vito for my 50th birthday celebration.
Mm-hmm.
My birthday's in July, but we were going to go before it gets super hot there. And obviously that was canceled. So I think like I was just like that stuff was just like sinking in and I had to work through it. But it was good. I felt really good on Sunday. So it worked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'll see you tomorrow.
Okay, Cool. I'm looking forward to it.
Also, I was thinking the other day that I wanted to commission you to make something, and now I can't remember what it is. I'm telling you, so you know that some things in my brain.
Okay. Yeah.
Maybe I was like, maybe she can make this. It might have been like a weird commission.
Yeah. Well, let me know if you think of it. I'm not going anywhere that I know of.
No, I actually just got an email today from Alchemy Art Center saying like, we still don't really know anything about the summer. I mean, I think we know, but I don't know why they're being like, I mean, because they
how many
want to survive.
do they, how many artists take part in the residency, and what are the living quarters like? Is it something that you could possibly social distance? Or
Kind of. I mean, it's like a shared kitchen and bathroom, so it would just be like,
yeah.
But they were like, well, we want to offer some programming via Zoom, and so I was like, well, we'll see how this one goes. Maybe I'll do something for them too.
Yeah, you should.
Yeah. But I think even now with like junior, I think even if for some miracle happened and they could host me this summer, I don't think I would go anyway, because who knows? Who knows what's gonna happen?
So it's a heart thing?
Well, so he has hyperthyroidism.
Oh.
One of the side effects is it makes his heart pump faster and harder, and then that makes the heart bigger, right? Because it's a muscle.
Mm-hmm.
So on Thursday, this is like, the news is not the worst, but on Thursday, the vet could only see how big the heart was and couldn't see, like, doesn't have the equipment to see anything else. And so basically she was like preparing me for the worst,
Mm-hmm.
like months to a year, maybe. But thankfully, the cardiology appointment on Wednesday showed not the worst. And what that means is, as we treat his hyperthyroidism, his heart could repair.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that's like definitely the best case scenario under the circumstances, but it's also like still very questionable. Also, sorry, you're still recording. You're gonna have to edit all this out.
Oh my God.